And bitterness also opens a believer's life to Satan. If you're in Ephesians 4, look at verse 26. Be angry and do not sin. Don't let the sun go down on your wrath. Why? Because that will give place, verse 27, to the devil. See, this whole track of being bitter and harsh and cruel and unforgiving, and that person hurt me so much, I will never, whatever. And you hear, I'll never forgive him, or I'll never forget, or I'll never let go of it, or whatever. Look what it does in verse 27. It gives a place to the devil. And bitterness opens a believer's life to Satan. When Paul warned believers about improper anger, he mentions Satan's horrible presence in verses 26 and 27. In fact, Paul similarly charged the Corinthians. In 2 Corinthians, he says this, starting in verse 10. He says, whom you forgive anything, I forgive also. For indeed I've forgiven. And if I have forgiven anything, I did it for your sakes in the presence of Christ. Why? In order that no advantage be taken of us by Satan. 2 Corinthians 2:12. We're not ignorant of his devices. What is he talking about? Did you know that bitterness, or this unforgiving, unrepentant of sin, is like being in a submarine and leaving the hatch open? And as soon as you go down, the element you want protection from, the submarine, floods you and sinks you. See, we leave the door open to the devil, and he has the ability to scuttle our joy and our peace and our security and our assurance. We don't have the abundant life. Why? Because the back door is propped open. And the fiery darts can penetrate and neutralize our spiritual lives. Bitterness opens a believer's life to Satan, poisons our life, imprisons us in the past, and finally, it closes. I mean, look what verse 30 says. It closes our life to God. Basically this, Jesus was so sober on the Sermon on the Mount where we started. He said, if you forgive men their transgressions, your heavenly Father will forgive you. But if you do not forgive men, your heavenly Father will not give you the benefits of your salvation. They'll be withheld, cut off. The life-giving Spirit that flows out of us, and we become like rivers of life-giving water, that ends. You see, we know that when you become a Christian, the laws of gravity aren't suspended. I mean, just because I'm a follower of Christ, if I walk to the edge of a whatever cliff and jump off, I will not float gracefully to the bottom. I will crash like anybody else because I am under, in this life, the laws of this universe. There are laws of the spiritual universe too. Here's one. Be not deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever you sow, you will reap. People think that's for unsaved people. That's for Christians. It's called the consequence engine. There is a consequence for every single sin that's already forgiven. The penalty is on Christ eternally, judicially, justification-wise, it's done. But every time I sin, there's a consequence. It breaks my fellowship with God and my relationship with others. And grace does not fix either one of those. I have to confess and forsake and receive the restored relationship with God and with someone else. And if I don't, I am increasingly walling myself in, and I'm living the Christian life horribly and agonizingly and joylessly and in my little prison. There's a consequence for every sin that grace does not take away. We're under the law of sowing and reaping all through life. If we sow to the flesh, we will reap destruction. If we sow to the Spirit, we will reap the endless joys on earth of no one being able to take my joy and peace away from me, because I am going to forgive, and I'm going to be kind, I'm going to be tenderhearted, I'm going to bless those that persecute me. And if they take my coat, I say, take my shirt too. And they go, what? You go, yeah, I want to be Christ-like. Instead of saying, I'm going to sue the daylights out of you, and I'm going to get my coat back and yours too. What a great testimony that is, you know? But bitterness closes a believer's life to God. Jesus was not saying we lose our completed past forgiveness of salvation. He was saying bitterness robs us of our ongoing relational forgiveness with God and with one another. And we can't be right with God when we're not right with those around us. That's why you can have all the Bible knowledge in the world, but if you're not applying it, there's not a rightness with God. And there's no joy, which is usually what shows up. Forgiveness that is energized by God's grace always restores us to that place of maximum blessing. It returns us to the purity of Christ. It brings us back to the joy of fellowship.